Vintage Super League time once again. I'm Randy Bueller. I'm joined by, making her VSL debut, Erin Campbell. How you doing?
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we've certainly seen you around the community plenty, Magic Mics, any number of podcasts. But it's been interesting watching through Twitter as you've really gotten into the vintage format over the last, year or so.
Yeah, it's really hard to go back. You can do such broken things in vintage, and it's really hard to go back to playing Thraben Inspectors when you've played, when you played with Bazaar of Baghdad, when you played with Paradoxical Outcome. You really can't go back, and so I'm kind of stuck here. But it's by my own choice. Like I'm definitely happy to be here.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
And I'm also really curious to see your deck choice, because one of the things we've been doing this season is we all agreed not to play the same deck more than once. And I feel like that hits you maybe harder than it hits everybody else, because so much of your experience seems to be through the dredge perspective.
Yeah, it's funny when you had asked me to participate in the league. I remember you had said to me, "Would you still want to do it if you could only play dredge once?" And I didn't know what that meant. I thought that meant that there were like some qualifiers, and you thought I wasn't going to do well. And I was like, "What does that mean?" and then you explained. You were like, "No, we're trying something new. We'd like you to play different decks." And I was like, "Well, I have other interests. Like this is fine." And so I've actually had the opposite problem. I've been trying so many different decks lately, and I just don't know which to play. Which again is a really good problem to have. But I'm just having a blast.
Awesome. Yeah, no, the format's fun. And I feel like it has been having a bit of a resurgence on Magic Online as well, between the new leagues that mean you can get, a good match with prizes on the line basically whenever you want, and the recent banning and restricted list changes. Format seems pretty sweet right now, not gonna lie. I've been having a lot of fun with it too.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge reason why I started playing vintage. The community's just been awesome. I think that there is a stereotype out there where people see how expensive the cards are, people see how difficult it is to obtain the cards, people see how few events there are, and people just sort of assume that there's this elitism. But I found the opposite to be true. Like people just want you to love vintage as much as they do, and they're willing to facilitate you any way that they can. And everybody's been so good to me since I started playing vintage, and it's great.
That's awesome. You're going to be at Eternal Weekend here in a couple of weeks?
My first, yes. I can't believe it. I'm just like, I'm geeked.
Yeah, no, Eternal Weekend is always a good time. And it's coming up, I forget the exact date. 2.5 weeks, right.
Yeah.
It's not that far away. I know that the Magic World Championships is obviously the big, huge event that's coming up, not this weekend, but next weekend. But Eternal Weekend coming up. It actually works out that Eternal Weekend will happen right before our final set of deck lists are due. Could make for some interesting last-minute scrambling from a VSL perspective. I'll be there as well. I'm going to go out and I'll be doing commentary. Yeah, that is really, you were talking about the community, which is why I brought this up. That really is this just annual pilgrimage, I feel like, for the vintage community. Everybody shows up, whether you're playing old school on Thursday, which I will certainly be doing. The vintage starts on Friday, the legacy on Saturday, both the top eights on Sunday. The whole weekend is just awesome. It's just a bunch of people who like playing with these cards hanging out.
I think it also helps that the event is really well run too. Shout out to Nick Koss, who runs Card Titan. My boyfriend plays, and we talk about VIP, and sometimes VIP isn't great. Let's be honest. But he said this is one of the few events where VIP is worth every penny. They really roll out the red carpet. You really get treated well. We saw it with the playmats. Look how awesome that VIP playmat is, Bazaar of Baghdad. And so you really just get the whole experience there, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Nick runs a great show, no doubt about it. And he's really taking control of that specific event. He took it over, I don't know, it's been, 5-6 years at this point. It's been in great hands ever since then. You can tell he cares. He's a player, too.
Yeah, that helps.
Comes through. Definitely helps.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the community. Quick update, just so people understand where we are in terms of our Vintage Super League season. Maybe you're just joining us. It's week 3, and so that means we've got the last 4 of our 12 players playing their first 3 matches. So tonight's group does include Erin Campbell. It also includes, there you see, Bob Maher, David Williams, and Paul Rietzel. So you didn't play on the Pro Tour back in the 90s, but somehow the rest of your group did. I think Paul's right on the bubble. I forget exactly when he made his debut, but it's probably pretty close.
Yeah, I'm trying not to think of all the GP top 8s that this group has. I'm just trying to think of it as they're just a bunch of normal guys. It's just nothing. And in my mind, I'm going Pro Tour winner, GP winner. I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah, no, it should be a fun time, too. I also think these are guys who definitely think for themselves when it comes to vintage. I mean,
Yeah.
Paul in particular just would rather brew something that he put together himself than grab a list. And Dave has shown up with some super spicy stuff. I mean, Bob has too. I mean, maybe not quite as spicy as what Paul and Dave have shown up with. But this, I just want to see what decks you guys are on too. I mean, in addition to watching some sweet matches.
Yeah, it's definitely something you have to think about. You know, one of the things I took away from the Community Super League when I was part of that is you really have to balance doing well, like wanting to win your games, but you are here to ultimately entertain people. And so, you know, you really want to choose things that are going to do well for you, but you know the people at home are going to want to see and going to want to root for. And I think I picked something that's outside of my comfort zone but also has an audience. I think people are going to like what I brought.
All right, fair enough. Now, in the couple of weeks since you found out this was your group, do you have a sense of what you're expecting from these other players, or you're just whatever, I'll show up, we'll see what happens?
I'm just I'm just happy to be here. I'm just ready to see what happens. I don't really have any preconceived notions. I'm not really reading into anything. And also it's just so hard it's very easy to mislead people too. I mean, I've been doing leagues with a half a dozen different decks. And so, you know, you could easily take a screenshot and say, this is what she's on, but no, I'm just testing. And so you don't know.
Yeah, and I've certainly begun testing decks for the next set as well.
Yeah.
The way it works is everybody has deck lists due on Monday. So 6 days from now, all 12 of us will submit decks again. They won't be the same deck we were just on. And we don't know who we're going to be dealt into a group with. So I'll submit mine early. That way I can put the schedule together and make sure we've got all our graphics and stuff ready for next week's show. But we don't currently know who's going to be on next week's show because we haven't done the schedule. We haven't got all the lists in yet. And it's just random. It's not like your previous record matters. It's not like your previous opponents matter too. So, I mean, you should expect there will be some repeat matchups. There actually have to be. You can't put 12 people into 2 sets of groups and not have any rematches because math.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious to see what people are going to bring to the table, whether, you know, who's going to wind up in groups with whom. And also most interesting to me, I think, are there any Ixalan cards that are going to sneak into those lists next week?
I was playing in a, because the accounts that we get can't join leagues, a little behind the scenes dirt for you there. So I had to play in just the general open lobby. And there was somebody who was playing and they were running the card draw. I can't remember the name, but it's if you draw 2 cards and if you attack, you don't have to discard one, I think. Yeah. And so that one had seen some play and I was very surprised to see that. But I don't know. I came off the pre-release this weekend with some ideas and we'll see if anybody, I know people are really excited about the Spyglass. A lot of the shops players were saying that that's something they're looking forward to. I certainly don't want to be on the other end of that Spyglass, but if it makes them happy, I'm willing to kind of hammer them.
Fair enough. I can show you got the schedule for this week crawling across the bottom. I think we also have a graphic for that as well. First match is going to be a couple of longtime friends, David Williams and Bob Maher. These guys go way back, literally play testing, traveling around the country together 20 years ago. So couple of, longtime friends throwing down in our first match, and then you are queued up to play against Paul second.
Yeah. Fun fact about Paul, I had him on the deck tease a while back, and I'm the one who introduced him to Skype. So when he's on Skype tonight, you have me to thank for that because he had never used Skype a day in his life until he came on my show. Yeah.
Funny. Well, I appreciate that. We're certainly forcing him to use Skype as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm also rooting for Bob. You know, we're both Wisconsinites, and so we got to for 50% of this is Wisconsin. So let's see if we can take it down. 1-1 for the Cheeseheads.
Missed that angle. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be a good time. So that is the state of things. In terms of the 2 groups that have happened previously, we do have 2/3 of the league knows their record at this point. The standings, there's kind of a scrum at the 2-1. I feel like somehow that's my fault. That you see me down there in the 0-3s, so I managed to lose to everybody last week. But then they all beat each other. They all split. That was Rachel and Eric and Steve. So 4-way tie for second place right now at 2-1. All those players obviously in great shape to make the playoffs. Reed Duke 3-0'd the first week, still sitting all by himself in first place. We'll find out whether somebody ties him this week or whether he gets to just have that lead going into the second set of decks. And yeah, me and Kevin definitely have some work to do.
I was there for the first night, and Kevin had such a rough go of it. And I was just like, Kevin, not like this. And I'm a big fan of Tagoras. I got to meet him at GP Vegas, and he's amazing and scary good at the game. Yeah, and so I look forward to playing him at some point.
Yeah, fair enough. So those are the standings. And I mean, before we do get set up with our first match, I do want to give a shout out to Cool Stuff Incorporated. That is our sponsor this season, coolstuffinc.com. They've got cool stuff in stock. It's nice to be able to put the Vintage Super League together and sort of have that community say, yeah, we want this show to happen. So between Patreon and Cool Stuff, we were able to put the season together on relatively short notice and sort of get in here and start messing around with this brand new vintage format.
Yeah, Cool Stuff sponsors Magic Mike's as well, and it's always nice to have a place sponsor you that you can really get behind. You know, I shop at Cool Stuff myself, and I'm lucky to be in a position where I can choose sponsors that I actually enjoy and that I don't necessarily, just need to get by.
Makes sense. Now, I haven't really heard your take on the new Banned and Restricted, the new vintage metagame as of the last month or so. Do you have a take on where things are? I'm kind of tempted to ask from the Dredge perspective, but I'm also curious of the more general perspective about how you think things have changed now.
I've been enjoying the format a lot. I'm a little concerned about Paradoxical Outcome, though. I feel like when Outcome first came out, there were sort of dedicated Outcome decks. But I feel like we've reached a point where Outcome is just in every deck, and you can't necessarily, but that doesn't mean it's an Outcome deck. Do you know what I mean? Whereas before, it was like you were seeing dedicated lists that were meant to really maximize that. And now it's just a plain old good card advantage card where it's going in every deck. And that makes it a little more difficult to sort of pin down when you're trying to sideboard and you're trying to attack it. So I'm a little concerned about that card, but overall I'm pretty happy with the format. As I think Dredge has had some developments lately. There have been a lot of us who've been trying the Hollow One plan.
Hollow One has been
you haven't lived until you played a free Hollow One, let me tell you.
I had it played against me, and I'm just like, okay, it's turn 2, and I'm not dead yet. I'm still just going to kill you.
Yeah, so we've been seeing some developments there. We've been playing Gurmag Anglers and things like that. So it's just an exciting time to be playing Vintage overall, I think.
But you think Hollow One is legit Dredge tech from?
I really do. I think that Dredge is one of those decks, that you really have to have an answer for, and it's common for people to sort of mulligan and keep bad hands because it has a cage or a relic or what have you. And I can't tell you how many times I've certainly shared the screenshots where you just lose to 2 4/4s because you kept a bad hand. You happen to board out things like Dak Faden. You happen to board out your Dismembers. You boarded out things you didn't think you'd need, and now you're staring down 1-mana Gurmag Anglers, and what are you going to do? And I've found that it just gets there.
Right, both of those are cards that can beat approximately all the Dredge hate that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's even sweeter when you win with a cage on the board, or you win with a Containment Priest on the board, and you're like, that's nice.
I have summoned a creature.
Yeah.
Let me use the attack phase. This will be great.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. To your concern about Paradoxical Outcome, as one of the guys trying to play the combo decks, I feel like there's so many more people concerned about Paradoxical Outcome than actually playing the card.
Yeah.
There is so much hate. I feel like if you want to be combo in Vintage, you just get to.
Yeah.
Like, you can't put Paradoxical Outcome in all the decks because it requires a critical mass of artifacts. I mean, realistically, you can try to get away with, maybe 12 or 13 0 and 1 mana artifacts is kind of the bare minimum, I think, for Paradoxical Outcome. But that means you're playing all the Moxes. Right, you're playing off-color Moxes. Maybe you've got, an Opal or a Chrome Mox in your deck, and you've got a Divining Top. Like, if you don't have off-color Moxes, Divining Top, maybe a key. If you don't have some of that stuff, you just don't have enough artifacts to actually pick up. I mean, so you can supplement with stuff like Snapcaster Mage, which is super sweet to pick up, or maybe pick up your Yawgmoth's Bargain. I had fun trying that last week. But you do need that critical mass of artifacts. But then if you have a dozen artifacts in your deck, you're so vulnerable to the Null Rods and the Stony Silences of the world that, I don't know, between that and all the Leovold and Notion Thief shenanigans that people are running, I feel like the fears of Paradoxical Outcome are overblown. If people ignore it and stop playing that stuff, yes, the deck is capable of being absurd. But building a Paradoxical Outcome deck that can actually succeed in an environment where you've got to deal with Leovold, Notion Thief, Stony Silence, Null Rod from a majority of your opponents, it's hard to make a living in that space.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. Leovold has certainly seen a little bit more play in Vintage, and I can't help but wonder if that's a response to, the rise of the outcome decks. And if that's the case, if that's the case, it might kind of sort itself out to where it won't be a problem, and that's a good thing. We definitely want to deal with things internally, as they say. You just want to have answers in the metagame to where you don't need to ban and restrict things. And so if Leovold can keep outcome in check, I think that's a good thing. But there are times where you're just like, how is this card real? It's just absurd. And then, you mentioned the divining top interaction where you can crack the top, hold priority, and get your extra card there, and it just does dumb things.
Look, the card when it works is crazy. You're spending negative mana to draw, 5, 6, 10 cards. Yeah. Those scenarios are absurd, but everything you can do in Vintage is absurd.
And that's why we're here.
Workshop is absurd. The dredge mechanic, the whole dredge deck is just absurd. So it's, which absurd thing you could do. I think that Leovold is absolutely a response to paradoxical outcome. I feel like it's a response to the threat of paradoxical outcome more than the reality of it. Like, have you seen the paradoxical outcome decks actually winning events?
Good point. No,
right?
I think I remember the challenge this past weekend, I think was heavy shops. I think shops was big this past weekend, which
shops
hasn't
is
been
still
for a while.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. The shops deck is still very good. Speaking of natural predators to the paradoxical outcome deck, that deck's obviously not happy when Sphere of Resistance hits the table, much less the however many restricted locked pieces they're up to at this point.
Yeah, I also was fascinated by the different metagames that come from different continents. I don't know if you caught the results from the MKM Vintage that happened in Europe. White Eldrazi was really big that weekend. I think they put 3 copies in the top 8, which we haven't seen. I haven't seen White Eldrazi in months. And so I think that's another one of those decks between the Thalias and the main deck Containment Priest that is also really scary and could also answer a paradoxical deck if it had to.
All true. Yeah, and I think it's also, there's a thing where the Magic Online metagame just moves faster, I think, than the real world metagame. Like, it's not trivial to change what deck you're playing at a paper Vintage tournament. I mean, there aren't that many tournaments for you to try out your deck at in the first place, but then obviously switching is pretty tricky. So I do find that the Vintage metagame moves a little. I think of it as moving faster on Magic Online. Like, it'll adjust to new technology, new cards, B&R changes faster. But it's those paper events, I think, are the really iconic ones. Like, Eternal Weekend essentially defines the year for this community, right?
Oh man, it's like spring break for Vintage. I'm so excited.
How many of the events are you going to play in?
I am signed up for the main event Vintage, and if I bomb the Vintage, which I'm probably likely to, which is fine, I'm also signed up for the main deck or for the main event Legacy the next day. So it should be fun.
Doesn't matter if you bomb Vintage or not. It's the top 8 for Vintage is on Sunday.
Yeah, and I'm just happy to be playing Vintage. Like, that's a thrill in and of itself.
So not old school.
But I don't know. It's a little too rich for my blood. I've had offers. There have definitely been people who offered to loan me things. The idea of reanimating a Triskelion, kind of lights me up inside. So I don't know if I can find a way to do it. I'd love to be there, but I just I hear the Wayne's World. I'm not worthy when I think of old school.
I mean, you talk about how it's that whole weekend is about the community. I mean, old school in particular, it's kind of barely a tournament. It's a legit tournament, but. Last year, the rule was if time expired and your match wasn't done, sudden death chaos orb flips.
Jeez.
There were no draws. Like, there didn't used to be draws. People don't like draws. We're just flipping chaos orbs to determine a winner if we run out of time.
I don't know if I'm hardcore enough for that.
Is hardcore the right word? But yeah, there was no top 8. It was basically like, all right, let's get together. Let's play whatever it was, 6, 7, 8 rounds of old school, and we'll hand out some cool prizes.
How good are you at flipping? Right? What's your flipping game like?
I mean, not good enough. Okay. It's actually the thing I need to practice before.
It's a science, I've heard.
You can. It is quite skill testing. It used to be harder back in the day. Like, nobody makes you take the Chaos Orb out of its sleeve. It's actually easier to flip a card in a sleeve than back in the day. Like, the actual sort of piece of cardboard's a little flimsier. But I started playing 1995. I'm not a true old schooler.
I was 12.
Well, I mean, Bob was running around the world flipping chaos orbs. Like, Bob will tell you about technique. Bob will tell you about playtest sessions where the thing you were playtesting was chaos orb flips. Like, that was a thing you had to do in 1994. That and practice, like, spreading your cards out so that no two of them could be hit by a chaos orb flip.
I don't think I've ever even come in contact with a chaos orb. I think the closest I've come to ever touching a chaos orb is the giant. I think it was in the Duelist or the Inquest, the crazy giant version. That was the closest I've ever come to being in contact with a chaos orb.
It's good times. So I haven't heard an update on our match between Bob and Dave. It shouldn't be too much longer now. Let me see if... Oh, okay, we do have a tech issue. It looks like we're probably 2 or 3 minutes away still. Fair enough. But we'll certainly have magic for you shortly.
Absolutely.
Also, this also buys Paul Rietzel time to get home from work. I was a little nervous that, all right, we went to 5 o'clock start time on a Rietzel night. It's like, Paul, you can be on Skype by 5:30, right? It's like, yeah, I can make 5:30 work. All right,
I think when you're Paul Rietzel, you kind of earn the right to be like a minute late. Like, I think it's fine, you know. Well, it's Paul Rietzel.
I mean, as the guy in charge of the schedule, though, I have to worry that
sure.
If Bob and Dave play a 10-minute match, then suddenly it's like, I
mean, I've got to be on time. I'm the vintage neophyte here, you know. But when you're Paul Rietzel, you can be like, I'm going to be 5 minutes late. It's like, you know, I'm the one who has to show up early and help set up chairs and the whole nine and
do the pregame show.
Yeah.
Put you through your paces.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody in the chat have anything you want us to be talking about? I'm trying to see. They want Chaos Orb flips to decide draws at Friday Night Magic.
Ooh. Can you imagine?
Sounds funny. I should have read chat earlier. They already knew Bob was having tech issues.
Uh-oh.
Predict Rietzel's deck. That is a good question. I have seen the deck lists.
Yeah, you have.
Getting ready for this week's show, so I cannot, in good conscience, predict Rietzel's deck.
He strikes me as kind of safe, dare I say? Like I know that he, if I'm trying to use other formats to maybe, you know, build an opinion here. And I know that he tends to, the last couple of times I watched him play Affinity, Modern, he went to Affinity, which is sort of like his safe space and his comfortable choice. And so I don't think he's going to stray too far from what he knows.
He went a little nuts last season in VSL, and he had success doing it. He showed up with, he showed up with a Spirits deck at one point. It was basically Blue-White Spirits.
Hello.
Sort of like the vintage version of a Blue-White Spirits aggro deck. He showed up with a blue-red Tinker deck, essentially. So it was blue-red, but had no permission. Like, I'm the one who had to play against him when we did not have deck lists. And, you know, I'm worried about Force of Will. Like, no, he's just like, I have all the broken cards, and I have all the artifact shenanigans, Goblin Welder, Tinker, let's see what I can do. That deck was, I don't even know what archetype it was. Like, it wasn't an archetype. It was kind of a Goblin Welder deck, but only kind of. So I think he just enjoys the challenge of attacking a new format and seeing what he can do. At the same time, I think you're not wrong about his instinct being to be aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he likes white weenie creatures. He's a Boros player in his heart of hearts. So something that attacks with small creatures might make sense. I don't know.
That reminds me of that one event. I don't know if it was a GP or a Pro Tour when Patrick Chapin showed up with like this weird Esper Delve list, and he was playing like Gurmag Anglers and Mishra's Bauble, and people were like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "No, it's the truth." And unfortunately, he ended up not doing well. But you know, when you're telling me that story of the deck with zero permission, that reminds me of the spicy meatball that Chapin showed up with, and everybody watching at home was like, "What is he doing?"
No, I remember that event. I was in the booth for that event. It was crazy. Like, nobody understood what Chapin was up to, and what is everybody playing in Modern now?
But I feel like he's one of those people that can do that. You know, there's the Adrian Sullivans, there's the Conley Woods, where they can show up with the Waste Not Grixis Vampires deck. If you or I showed up, we would get laughed out of the hall. We'd be dropping at 0-6. But, you know, when you're Adrian Sullivan, you can day two with a list like that. When you're Conley Woods, you can show up to the Pro Tour with Necromancer Stockpile and do well. Like, there's just certain players that have that magic or that spark to play whatever they've got and do well with it.
Fair. PT Fate Reforged. Thanks, Wandering Winder.
That was a Pro Tour, yeah?
It was a Pro Tour. Yeah, it was totally a Pro Tour.
Man, that was like an F&M brew.
The deck was close. Wasn't quite there, but it was certainly close.
She says 2 years later when Mishra's Bauble is, you know, a rarity, and I'm casting Gurmag Anglers now, you know, what was he thinking? And now
I think that deck definitely, you know, previewed a number of things that have become very relevant to Modern in particular.
Oh, we see that a lot sometimes. We see oftentimes like rough drafts of decks where people are like, there's something here, I don't really know what it is. And we saw that with Death Shadow for a while. They're the really rough versions of it. It took a while to really figure out what was the best configuration, and then people started playing that into the ground.
All right, it looks like we are ready to go. Let's get down to the first round of Vintage.
Yes.